evening, everyone. I call to order the special meeting of the River Falls Board of Education. This meeting has been properly notified. Do we have any visitors or delegations who would like to address the board? All right, we are going to move right in to the potential for action to approve the lease agreement, including all exhibits here to between the School District of River Falls and the RF Ren Project LLC for the lease of real property for a public school with an initial lease term of 20 years. At this point, do we have a motion, please? Thank you, Cindy. Is there a second? Thank you, Lindsay. Any discussion? We have just completed an elections meeting and we had unanimous for any meeting. Yes.
I just was gonna say, we have seen many discussions and voting on it, you know, conflict of interest.
I agree, and thank you for the two of you for this. Any other questions? Comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried at 5-0. And now at this point, the board is going to consider the potential for a debt defeasance for 2022-2023. This is a very complicated concept and process. To help us with this, we have Chad and we have Christy, who has served us extremely well with that. I turn it over to you.
So Chad and I had put together a little PowerPoint that at one point wanting to send an email in advance of this meeting to the board to talk defeasance, and it just seemed easier rather than in email form to put together the PowerPoint. And so you've had a chance to see that in advance of this meeting. The PowerPoint that you have in front of you is the same. There were just a couple of slides that were added, and we'll get to those in a minute. But again, the quick overview here is that I've been a superintendent for 25 years and have only done a thesis twice, both here in this district. This would be the second. So it's not that it's completely new to our district. We did this once prior to, I think it was 2018, I believe. And so the main advantage of the defeasance is that it's basically saying that this is where Jeff and Chad chime in and help me here. But basically, that we levy in this first year, we would levy this $1 million in debt service, so that that money would really be put into an escrow account. And then we draw from that escrow account and we pay down some pre-existing debt over the next 5 years. The first year it's only like paying in about $45,000, and the next year it's about $45,000, and the third year it's a bigger $350,000. So you're drawing down on that million over the next 5 years, and it helps to stabilize your debt payments for a longer duration. You're prepaying some debt in the process, which obviously is a good thing. And so, without getting into the weeds any deeper than just that generic explanation, I guess I would ask if Chad or Jeff want to add details, or do we want to play this out by board questions? You've seen the PowerPoint. I will just draw to your attention. So what's new on here? All the way towards the back, I added a slide that says clarification. Sorry, that number. It says clarification. And I added this because I want to make sure the board has a good understanding that if these are all numbers that are up in the air with regard to a future referendum. We have talked with the board about a possible February of 2024 date for a referendum, but we have a lot of legwork to do between now and then to know the details of what would that referendum be for meaning what facility improvements to do. We're entering into a contract with a new demographer that's going to do an enrollment projection to help us see the need for space needs, classroom needs into the future based on enrollment. Where are we headed for that trend? And then analyze all of our facilities along with that enrollment growth and space needs. There's at least 4, if not 5, kind of big ticket items that the community has talked about. And the only way that those 4 or 5 things would be able to happen would be through a referendum because the district doesn't have the money to, for example, improve a very antiquated bus garage, the transportation center. I've said before that if our school buildings and our classrooms were of the same quality, our parents would be in an uproar. That place needs a redo, big time. The second issue would be whether or not the community wants to entertain a field house addition onto this high school. Some have asked for consideration to turn our artificial turf field in back of the high school into an athletic stadium that would require bleachers, concession stand, press box, parking issues comes into play, and so on. I think I mentioned restrooms and so on. Some have in the community have identified, and we've talked some as a district as well about more recreational space, i.e. Middle school gymnasium addition. We have a school forest that we would like to at least get a gravel road into a facility that we would build. All of those things, they can't happen without community support. And so with this defeasance, the reason I'm mentioning those referendum options are that we're a long ways away from really getting some of those things out in front of the public. We've got a lot more homework to do. We did do one community survey, you recall, regarding those facility issues. We asked an early opinion from people on those 4 or 5 issues. And so as a part of that future referendum conversation, the pieces comes into play also as it helps us to stabilize the mill rate over time. It opens a door of opportunity for a referendum to potentially have little or no tax impact. And so this all kind of fits into, again, a bigger picture down the road, but as an immediate decision that we want to talk to you tonight about the business. Correct. Yeah, so.
Exactly. I think we all understand that, but just so anybody who's kind of listening to this thinks, oh, we're going to be able to do this. Tax money anymore. It's not going to increase.
That's an option, correct. And that's again part of what it will be, the fees and stuff to create that option for the future. If the community wants to support, it'll be their decision with all of these things, not ours. Your only decision will be whether or not to put it on the ballot, and that's up to the community to vote. So we're trying to kind of set the table for that option in the future that would help to stabilize that kind of increased tax and stabilize the mill rate.
Also, you understand this, but just as we're talking, because of appetite, others, for all those things you listed as possibilities that could be February 24th. Maybe one of those questions. So somebody's listening to this going, well, I 4 out of those 5, or there's 1 of those 5 that I would like to. So at a certain point, we could decide that this is going to be 3 questions, or 2 questions, or 1 question, or 5 questions.
Yeah, for exception, and that is there's a fairly new law that's in play that says in a given calendar year, school districts can only ask 2 referendum questions. You could ask one in February or April and another one in November, that'd be a 2. Or you could ask 2 questions in February or April or November, whenever, but then you're done with the year. Just to be clear on that, there won't be 3 questions or 4 or 5. There will be 1 question or 2.
So when you list it, so it's like 8 things out there, you wouldn't have an option to work.
No, but I appreciate the conversation, because those that might want, that are either listening tonight or this is recorded, we can refer to it later, that you kind of gave me a nice segue to this clarification slide that I was drawing your attention to, because if as we gather our enrollment study and we do more homework on facilities, the district will get to a point where we will then put together another second survey for the community. And we'll say to them, this is kind of what we're looking at. Give us your feedback on the survey, and then we'll have to recalibrate it and say, not much support for this, but there is support for that. And that's all a part of the process where the community will be involved with the board as we move towards this possible February 24 referendum. There'll be more community engagement along the way, listening sessions, input, surveys, and so on. Now, this is going to come out of the blue. We're just far enough away, though. We've got to put a few things in order to do this the right way for our taxpayers. So this clarification slide, what I want to point out is that with the defeasance that we're discussing tonight and stabilizing that mill rate, it would open up a window in February of 24 based on today's estimates. Future property growth as a whole, the value of all property in our district, interest rates, some factors related to our enrollment, all of that is, this is the projection you're seeing tonight, that with this defeasance in February of 24, we could ask voters for a $40 million referendum, and it would have that stable tax impact. No tax increase. The clarification memo, what I'm trying to do, we put it into a little slide, is to say, now be reminded that that's one question if it was 100% related to facilities. And we've gone through, I made blue copies for you because at a previous meeting, the board reviewed the terminology that goes with referendums. There's basically 2 types of referendum. One is a bond referendum, where you get a loan to do facility improvements. The other kind of referendum is an operational, and that's where you ask the community to support. We need more money to run our schools. We need more money to keep up with the rate of inflation. The school funding formula is not providing adequate funding sources, so we got to come to you as a community by way of an operational referendum, different from a bond for facility referendum. Those would all, in all likelihood, if we had 2 questions, one would be a bond referendum for facilities, and the other would be operational. Don't know yet if we even need to go down that road. Pretty sure that we're going to go down the road with a bond referendum for some facility improvements. Not sure yet if we'll need to go down that road. We're being a little bit held hostage by the biennial cycle of state funding. Right now, we're in the middle of a 2021-23 cycle. And we don't know yet what the legislature will do with the 23-25 2-year biennial cycle. I bring that up because that could have some impact on whether or not we need an operational referendum or not. Not to confuse you with terminology, but back to the clarification slide, $40 million bond referendum for facilities is what this defeasance would do. If we do decide to combine that with an operational referendum, don't be thinking in your head that it would equate to you would still have 40 million, and so you could do 36 million for facility improvements in a bond, and then you'd have 4 million for operational. It doesn't equate that way, because bond referendum, you're literally getting a loan from a bonding agency that is giving you that upfront loan for facilities. Operational, you're not getting a loan from anybody. You're asking local taxpayers, is it okay, will you support the operational referendum? It would mean a tax increase for you, unless we would mindfully use the dollar amounts through this defeasance to stabilize all of that and not allow a tax impact to hit. So it's complicated, and that's one reason why Jeff is here, if we need to get into the weeds further on that or not. I tried to paint 3 scenarios. Scenario option 1 on the clarification slide says $40 million bond referendum facilities. That'd be tax neutral. Option 2, you could do a $20 million bond and allow an operational referendum for 4 years. I didn't write that on there. You might want to. This would be a non-recurring 4-year operational referendum for $750,000 each of the 4 years. But in doing that, again, you decrease. You can't also go up to 40 million on your facilities. You kind of work hand in hand. One pulls on the other. And then the last option is just, again, to understand it, you could do the $40 million referendum and say to people, tax neutral, not going to increase your taxes, and still have a second question, and you can say for operational purposes, we'd still like you to approve an operational referendum question number 2. That question will have a little bit of a tax impact, and you would explain what you mean by little bit. We have that all defined, obviously. We're not there yet. We could have on this slide, we could have option 4, option 5, option 6, how those strings pull on each other depending on how much of the operational or facility related bond referendum. I could paint you a zillion of these with Jeff stuff. I just captured a couple of examples, wanting to be clear so that you are clear that the operational and the bond referendum questions kind of tug on each other a little bit. The only other thing I added on the next slide, I noted, I had shared with the board ahead of time, step 1, the annual meeting budget coming up this next month, in September, would reflect this $1 million defeasance. And I had on there step 3, previously, in alignment with the annual meeting, then in March, sometime around March, the board would take action to set up the escrow account, and so it can be radio silence for that. I added step 2 as a reminder that there's also this intermediate. We have an annual meeting. We don't, then we have a board meeting in October after we find out how much aid we get from the state. Then we actually, you as a board, set the real levy. Chad does a great job at the annual meeting of predicting what that levy will be, and he's always really, really close at it. But it could be tweaked ever so slightly at that October meeting, so I just added that note on here. And then one more. The next page, I tried to paint disclaimers in the blue on that referendum planning notes. Very preliminary cost estimates and facility needs. Premature estimates. Intended to give a very rough range of potential costs, blah, blah, blah. So we're a long ways away from knowing any dollar amount, what the question would be, and so on. But just to illustrate by example, I listed those big 5 things along with that small note at the bottom on the operational, just to remind you again that would influence. It might not be a $40 million referendum. If you want to try to maintain tax neutrality, you wouldn't be able to do $40 million. The rest, there's no other changes to any slides that you saw in advance. So,
Come back to the question today. So let's say what I asked for, what we got to the point of state budget list, quarters, so we got to go for an operating referendum. everybody would ask one facility question and one operational question.
Yes.
So when it comes to two questions, we hopefully wouldn't have to ask for an operational question. That would always be applicable. But regardless, two questions.
That's right.
One question or two questions, calendar year or a.
I think it's calendar year.
Make sure you speak up so that the voices are correct.
Just want to make sure we don't limit it in case we had to do something with the operational referendum in November and then.
It's calendar.
Yeah.
Jamie, what would happen if we didn't, just for my understanding, what would happen if we didn't do it?
If we don't do a defeasance, Jeff can help us to kind of readjust our existing bond payments. That would allow us in February of 24 to ask a referendum question up to 27 million, not 40. It'd still be tax neutral.
Let's get some questions. Is there a step up that happens in 2024, or is there this change a step up or a step down? What is it?
Our biggest step down was planned for 29. And that kind of fits in with why I mentioned that this defeasance of setting $1 million over here in escrow, then we would slowly draw out of escrow. And I said, first year, you're going to pay about $45,000, second year, you're going to pay about $45,000, third year, you pay $3.25, $3.50, and bigger amounts for that 5 years that would get us to that year of 29 when there is a significant drop. And the board had done some deliberate planning around that. And so the first question I answered, did I say that correctly? Your first question, the question was, if we didn't do a defeasance, did I answer that correctly? The $27 million answer?
So this is about flexibility, and having options.
Okay.
Some options.
Now, just to, I guess, to step back with, first of all, you guys have been through this before. You guys have this history of meticulous plan for future needs. With the last school district, you guys have always come on letting out community, staff, and board. I'm looking at what you can do to create flexibility. Now, the season is simply changing on the minutiae, take money, put it in the rest of the funding box, retain that on first. So you're actually moving forward the levy to make those payments. You aren't adding a brand new levy that you would not have had. You have this levy somewhere down the road here. You're moving forward. And the reason the school is you're saving for paying off debt early or creating some sort of structured bond that we're looking at doing to give you some added capacity under this tax neutral concept and flexibility. And the tax neutral is an on point. You're going to get two bonds, there's going to be a tax impact. Tax neutral is simply here's what you're paying now, and if we issue bonds, you don't go above what you're paying now. If it's a tax neutral concept. Now, you could issue more in bonds, yeah, that may be needs, and much of it will be absorbed under tax neutral, which will go over a cap tax neutral. Because the 40 million what a tax neutral would be. So you're basically moving that in full. And this year, you have an opportunity to the overall levy is going to be dropping somewhere between 1 million and 1.2 million. So your levy's dropping, and so now you have an opportunity to add that back without going over the mill rate from last year. Okay, add that back and use that debt to create this.
So, what is the best different variations in these questions? Why wouldn't you want to do the case made, or why you would want to, why you should? I'm just looking at this in the way the board runs, and the way you want to be fiscally responsible. You don't want to be jerking around, probably check to see it up and down, and people be surprised. We want to make sure we're doing long-range responsible planning. And it just seems so logical. The last of these is just, why would we want to make it into one?
Well, I would give an example like if you get to February of '24 and there is no referendum to be held or the referendum fails, what would happen?
So,
I think I know the answer. It's a rhetorical question.
yeah, we would plan on closing this petition after February 11th.
Okay, so that's,
So we can look at it and instead of taking it for the surety we decided to pay off, we could do some adjustment at that point.
alternatively to your question, I think for me, the transparent answer to anybody that thinks this is a bad idea, I think they would latch on to saying, okay, if I got it right, what Jeff just said was, you're gonna take $1 million and you're gonna move that part of it forward, thereby maintaining my property taxes. But had you not done that, wouldn't my property taxes have actually gone down? That would be the critic who would say, what's the downside of this? Full transparency, that to me, otherwise, there's so many logical, good fiscal planning that makes sense with all of this, that is the only piece that I personally can imagine would be what someone who's critical of the pieces would say.
And remember, you're moving it up, so eventually they would pay that anyway. And I wanna go back to what it is, so actually, I was thinking February 23, your election February 24, so your petition will go before the election. So you're going to have to plan on that, and if it passes, they'll fall on place. If it doesn't pass, you just put the petition forward for year before, so it's structured and redone. Then you could go back in the fall and try it again. You don't use your second ballot question at the same time. So there's a point to be made, you only have two ballot questions. The point to be made that if you run something and you structured it that this passes and that you can play, you want to put it on your question, it depends on the reason. If you have that next, but when you're talking about operating capital, then you might have to put two questions out there right away. If you're dealing with just capital, and you decide that operating isn't something that could address right now, then you may want to do a long and single question, and then come back within the fall, and you get structured a different plan or something very similar. And then in that second question, you can take advantage of what you did. Now, you did take down the labor structure, it's not all in a single year, so you spread it out over 4 years. So that's going to help a little bit if it becomes successful and it will take years to pass. And help a little.
So, it sort of goes some really quick, but it seems to be, well, first off, I would say that one of the things we've been also very careful about in this board is not picking out, not to bring a referendum in front of the board very often. And only when we have something different, so it's not like we're, a couple of heads, well, let's have a referendum. We really sort of planned and projected out and planned this in such a way that we weren't doing these things. So I'd be a little concerned if we were thinking back on it, we might have two referendum questions in here, one in the spring, one in the fall. Maybe we do a follow-up in the spring one failed, but there's a problem. I don't think we want to go to the well. Yeah, we've done it before when one failed. We don't want to go to the well too many times because then I think we get really confused. So if we are, I could see that if we were in there, a number of school districts our size in the state, if we were a district who was experiencing steady decline in enrollment, okay, and our long-range planning was for steady decline in enrollment, I'm not sure we would necessarily be talking about the tangible things we got now. But we're a district who, even if the demographer tells us that our enrollment's going to flatten, or even decline a little bit, it's not going to be much. The needs we're talking about right now, unless our enrollment drops, it's going to be there for the long term. So I think it's reasonable for us to be thinking long term. And it's reasonable for us to be thinking about a way to stage these improvements to the district so that they don't have a surprise impact so that taxes are going up and down. And that it's also addressing the GDP, which goes to my other, but the last referendum, we had a facility to do, was the rural assessment, like 70 or 80 million. And we ended up asking for 40 or 50 because that's what our community survey said that we needed support. Will we do that again this time?
Oh, yeah, we'll do a, like I said, there'll be listening sessions, getting feedback and input, and then we'll do a survey, say this is kind of where the board is leaning, what do you think? And then we'll review that, and we might have to recalibrate our board thinking at the time to see what the community is telling us before a referendum is ever held. Yeah.
Because what we want to avoid, I guess, where I'm going with this, is people go, the board realizes they're going to be building taxes for $40 million and they're going to fill that hole. Okay? This is not a Christmas list, right? These are going to be needs. We have needs in this district that are far exceed $40 million. And that's kind of what we do last time. Just because we have the potential to tax for this and to not have any tax, doesn't necessarily mean we should unless we have a new. That's the.
And ultimately, it's the community will decide if there's a $40 million referendum invest or not, no matter what you do with the fees. It's still up to them.
It's our need that is driving our interest in it. It's not because we have to do something, we want to do something. It's that we've already identified, we have to be, and able to do this with pieces, it gives us more long-term financial flexibility to be responsible. It's our need to drive this absolutely.
Is the timing of meeting the flexibility related to me, in my head, it has related to the uncertainty in the state budget, right? Because we may need an operational referendum, but we may not. In a typical year when state funding is going, as predicted each year.
We've never, in 10 years I've been here, we've never talked about an operational referendum. It's never been a topic of conversation, I agree with you.
So then it makes it really simple for us to create more flexibility because we're uncertain about that. Kind of, right?
It's part of it.
It's also true that those needs that were not addressed by the last referendum remain, and we are getting even more needs. That's why we're getting older than the last one. We're obviously needing to increase comfort on future ahead of us with the Renaissance. So the needs are remaining out there.
And as far as the timing of this year's data is creating the situation where you want to look at this, if this has to go on the letters, will ultimately be in October. So it's coming up, and that's driving the timing, whether we use or not. As far as the need, there will be a lot of schools that are on the left. None of them sell on funding. They all sell on the to your point. It's explaining to the and having people say, okay, I get that. finances or just how we're going to accomplish?
I strongly suspect that we are not going to be able to know about our interest plans and operating plans until we hear from the legislature. If the legislature comes to me and keeps us full, we are without discussion. But if that does not come to fruition, we're still going to be.
And, hope would be that the state would make us all, avoid the financial burden, give us some of the resources, and that the state budget surplus is even larger than we ever had. So to not commit some of that school system to a real cost self-supporting, hopefully, with a few more victim costs, that the good economic situation that's going on in the state and happening, we can utilize this.
I'm wrong. Not open.
And we won't know that till next spring. But it would be significantly after the
Well,
moment.
like, probably,
Jeff, Jeff, how often is this?
We are seeing quite a few schools take advantage of it last year and this year because of the situation where you have the revenue. You can only generate so much revenue formula. The tax levy is stated, right? State aid went up last year, put the tax levy down. So a lot of schools, but if you took advantage of this just for pure savings, some took advantage of it for capital plan, like we're talking. In River Falls, the taxpayers, the levy went down on the so that was a benefit to the taxpayers for doing that levy on. But now that you're getting closer to having identifying needs and when you want to go out, this year, the same thing, we'll see the same thing. Under the revenue limit this month, if the levy is dropping because some of the state aid is coming in higher, and it's quickly let down. In addition, you have property values growing, so that is driving the other down a little bit too. So last year and this year, we've seen a lot. Prior to that, we've only done a handful, and you guys are one of them, because we weren't seeing that drop in levy where it was creating opportunity to maintain the levy and then take that off early. So whether it continues in the future, it all has to do with the legislation.
So Jeff, what are the other things that we need to know about this in order to make plans? For this issue, what are the things that happen?
Yeah, well, and I think you guys are very confident in the main point, as long as they're understanding exactly what it is, and I think for the public, them understanding that it's not necessarily a new tax, it's moving the tax forward. Now, if you pass a referendum, but if you move this forward and get nothing, ultimately, where people would pay more in a future year, they're going to pay less in a future year. So that's one of the key things. There's this creates a situation where you have more flexibility that actually is not. If you guys have capital needs, you may have operating needs. It's an opportunity that I don't think most districts would pass the cost and manage their ongoing tax levy. Because if you let it drop, and that's usually really a budget drop, which, obviously, they have your money, they like that. But at the same time, you have needs. So you're going to go out and ask for the same thing. So,
You'd see a spike in the
yeah,
needs.
it's fun. Yeah.
The way I would say it is, if somebody doesn't like that they could observe some savings, work to defeat a referendum potentially, we're still gonna see them back at one way or the other. To me, Jamie said, somebody opposes the idea of it, they have a chance to voice that when the referendum comes up for question. And it would have that same impact if, at the time, if we're not able to have the 40 million or whatever the number is, 27 billion, but, they would see that savings if the argument is I should see that tax savings. They would see that savings that out early, and if you don't want to support that, then you'll still see it at the end of it.
Where does the money come from that goes into that program? Okay. So it's not that we're finding $1 million to take as a big chunk, but it's not.
We're levying it, but as I understand it, we're levying less because of this state income gone up. So it's created this $1 million that we can levy back, but that is not a tax impact. So
If you use real numbers, you get at least their level of $10 to $14 million last year, it would go down to $13 million. A little more confident that the few days we can take $1 to this, it gives them the one that's growing and slowly, you know,
And that million, now, if you understand, you're moving that forward, it would happen down the road anyway.
because we would have a debt maintenance.
If you would have looked at,
Could I ask you another question? I don't know if I saw it in the slides, but this isn't something, like, say we had done this last year, just to take advantage of the savings, and we weren't looking at it for capital planning. Is it something you can do once every so many years? Like, could you have done it last year and then say, oh, now for capital planning purposes, the same phenomenon happened again this year, we want to take advantage of that additional savings and put more into the escrow account, or was it kind of, you can play this once every 5 years?
you can do it using pretty much any kind you want.
Okay.
But the thing with this particular plan is you are lining up with this $1 million drop in the levy. That's what you know. If your levy is dropping, you can go ahead and add $1 million to your levy, but then you're artificially pushing your levy up.
Sure.
So that's something, so that's why they aren't doing it more often.
Yeah.
They're doing it only when that levy's dropping and it's creating that opportunity.
Even, because it's always going to save people money to pay off the debt faster. But it's kind of like saying, okay, yeah, we want to, we need $8 million to pay off this debt, and the faster we can do it, the more we save in interest. But oh, by the way, there's a huge tax impact to what, you know, now, yeah, that makes more sense. But I wasn't sure where that second dynamic is. You could do it at a time, it's just if you don't have the phenomenon we have now, you have to go back and ask for people to pay more in taxes.
Yep.
Okay.
So basically, it's coming once a year when you set your taxes. Okay.
So Jeff, on this handout that you provided, the first one says at the top, the 27 million question the city asked. And so for clarity, on my notes, what I wrote on here is that that's a no defeasance. On the 27.
So essentially, what this graph there is, your red is your existing converted to mill rate. The blue is $27 million, and we adjusted the payment so it kept this low.
So how did it come up with 27? Why wasn't it 26? Why wasn't it 31? How did it get to be 27, I suppose? Because we asked Jeff to tell us what can we do in remain tax neutral. The answer is 27 million. Without getting into the other narrative pages, but then there is the other graph page, is that what is page 4. That one is, as it says on the top of this page, different from the first one. On page 4, it says 40 million with the $1 million defeasance.
But so basically, by taking $1 million this year, create $13 million worth of flexibility. Right? That's basically
Chad and Katie this afternoon, and I poked holes in it when I was told I wasn't successful. And our discussions, right now, I'm still not seeing the reasons why we do it. Like I said, I'm just trying to be a pessimist here. I'm trying to look at the worst case scenario. I always look at making a decision and making the most options later. And this is clearly that.
the offset is you potentially reduce taxes. You talk to taxpayers.
Yeah,
I talk to a lot of them. What they don't like is this and this and this and this and if if there's a tax decrease this year and then all of a sudden you see a tax increase because of some of the things you do, they're gonna remember the tax increase. They're not gonna remember the tax increase. They like things to be consistent. Just we do as a board, right? We like to have $200 a year per kid or whatever it is. People like to have
Because it's
some
predictable.
reliability.
I would say consistent as long as you can identify that there's a need, like, not just consistent with the reckless, purpose.
The way that school funding is structured, districts have to comment. We can refer that at least so often, otherwise we wouldn't be able to fix our roads and our buildings.
We sort of addressing that, as we're talking about, as I look at how nice and flat these come and increases, this provides something else for us, because the rest of the districts, the majority, is significant. My budget is payroll, right? And if our budget is not predictable and steady, that puts, I think that puts our payroll at some risk. And our ability to compensate inflation in this district. Yeah, it's so important. So I think this provides some stability to that too. And what the Bob's comments here too. Why wouldn't we do this? Because it just makes good business all the way around to do this. So that provides us opportunity. If we do reach 40 budget, maybe in the end we'll only end up reaching 30. And you're not asking for it.
Have you thought of the other operational expenses? Let's do that as well. Have you thought about that?
And this is just guessing, but if you're stabilizing the debt service, then there's less fluctuation across the board.
Well, we can have that conversation, but at this point, we have a motion to approve the 2022-23 bond debt defeasance as presented. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Todd. More questions, comments, discussion?
I was gonna ask, but I think we just touched on it, but I believe this is only come up once that I heard another chat. Now, refresh me, what we have for debt is not impacting. Like, if we take on more debt, it's not coming out of the fund that we use to pay the salaries and those kind of things, right? It's basically just an attack on amounts. If we approval to take on more debt, it's not like it's coming from, if I buy a car, and I finance it, that comes out of what I have to spend personally, but it doesn't necessarily work in direct control when it comes to insurance companies. So by saying, it's not like saying, hey, that $1 million, we could have taken and just given more raises to that. I think that was my point. It's not taking from one to give, to start prepaying debt. How come we need to get more for raises, or how come I pay this much for health insurance? It's not the same.
But they're related. I know that you can't pump that, because part of the reason I really like this is, I know you mentioned this here, so if we can stabilize this and allow for some significant construction to that, your referendum, like your operating growth. That means that sometimes like with salaries and all of those kinds of things on a daily basis, or we could stabilize that compensation. It would be significant, but not necessarily impact. Keep the balance of that.
Yeah, that's fair. I just was saying, like, it's not like this $1 million could go, could keep taking someone else.
And just to clarify that, so you see this drop in $1 million, the revenue limit do not allow you to tack that on to this robbery. It only allows you to do so for debt.
Sure.
It's an escrow agreement, very specific, for the purpose of use of those funds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is that.
And you identify certain amounts that pay off.
I'm sorry, once the bail issue with new bonds, when you restructure this, when you do new bonds or anything like that.
Any other questions? We have a motion that moved in second. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. I think it's really important to make sure that this board and the community understands that part of the reason that we are able to make this very responsible for making financial decisions is that we have really good advice from our administrators as well as from you, Jeff. Who understands our district, who knows that we're able to do business, and thank you for all of that. We couldn't do it without you. So, with that, we
I